reporting on the games you love by people who love to game. The MMO Reporter Network. You're listening to LOTRO Reporter on the MMO Reporter Network. Brought to you by Audible. Go to audiblepodcast.com/MMO Reporter to get your first month free. And by Doghouse Systems. Go to doghousesystems.com and use the coupon code MMO Reporter to get a free 120 gig SSD with your purchase. Hello everybody, and welcome to a special report here on MMO Reporter and LOTRO Reporter. I am chatting with Jerry Snook, aka Cordovan from Standing Stone Games. Hello, Jerry.
Hey, Chris, how's it going? Appreciate you being here.
It's wonderful to talk to you again. And we also have Rob Ciccolini. He is known as Severlin. Hello, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
You said you wouldn't get his name right.
You know what? I was sitting there as I'm leading up to it, a little part of my brain just repeating it. It's wonderful to have you both here, and I always feel the need to mention this, Jerry, when I chat with you, because from my perspective, there is this history with you, and that is that you are. Your DDO cast was the first podcast that I listened to with any sort of regularity, and was a big part of myself, my wife, and our friends as we played DDO before you transitioned into working at Turbine. So for me, there's a really big connection there that was a really cool thing. So I always feel that I need to mention that.
Aww. Oh, yeah. I'm honored. I appreciate it. You know, it's kind of funny. This the last couple of years have been a lot of big anniversaries for, Dungeons and Dragons Online and Lord of the Rings Online. DDO Cast is celebrating its 10th anniversary in February. So.
Wow. I think LOTRO Reporter is looking at about 6 or 7 years that it's been going. So that's it's fun to see all this community that builds around these games.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Let's get right into the meat and potatoes of why we're here to chat. There has been a big transition in these properties, LOTRO and DDO, both moving over to Standing Stone Games. Now, before we get into that, I want to ask you a little bit about what this new company looks like, and then we'll get into some of the details about how it happened. Is this a privately owned company, or are there financiers? Your publishing deal with Daybreak. I mean, how is this working as far as who owns Standing Stone Games?
Sure. Let me preface sort of our talk on Standing Stone Games with a little bit of a disclaimer, and that is that there are certain things we're not able to talk about. This was a private business deal, and so there are some certain aspects that I know people might be interested in that we're not going to be able to answer, and so I do apologize about that.
Right.
But we are the developer now for DDO and LOTRO as an independent group called Standing Stone Games, and we are getting publishing support. Our publisher is Daybreak.
Okay, so I'm asking, it'd be a cool kind of so is it owned by the employees? Are you able to get into that a little bit, or is it sort of an external source?
I don't know how much I can get into that,
okay.
Although I could say that it is not owned by employees. We're not sort of some kind of co-op sort of studio here. It is a traditionally funded development studio.
Right. Yeah. So how did this come about? Like, what was the journey from going to integrated parts of Turbine into your own company now, understanding that about was it 6 months ago, maybe a little bit more, Turbine announced that they were making a move towards being a mobile development studio?
Turbine has been great to work for, but they definitely wanted to take a change in direction with Warner Brothers, and I totally get that. When that came up, there's been a long discussion about, how can we best serve the players of the MMOs. Nobody wanted them to suffer because of the change in direction in Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers was absolutely fantastic about helping us and helping us with Daybreak to turn this around and keep the games going, and still allow Warner Brothers to concentrate on the new direction that they wanted to.
Right. Was there ever discussion of, well, Turbine wants to go to be a mobile game studio, and I guess we're going to have to look at whether we sort of sunset the MMO portion of the studio?
I don't think that anybody wanted to do that because there's too many loyal fans. Turbine is not like some corporate entity. It's full of gamers like you and me. And so they're pretty sensitive and empathic to the love of the MMOs, and they themselves love these games because a lot of them worked on them.
Is it weird now talking about Turbine as an external entity rather than we?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, a little bit.
You know, how did it happen? Like, there was some internal discussion. Was there a lot of ramp up, or did you guys have to move pretty quickly to make this happen? How did that process work out?
Yeah, it was a weekend. It took about a weekend, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. I can neither confirm nor deny the long and arduous process of splitting this out. No matter how long you think it takes, like it takes longer.
And what do you think was the of the stuff you can talk about? What do you think was the most challenging part of excising yourself from Turbine?
There was just so many moving pieces from, like there's so many things that are tied up into the company that people don't even think about, like who owns all the licenses for the software, and how do we move the hardware, and what do we do about the shared bits? Because there was a lot of things that we did to leverage WB and their power in our sort of technology that had to be kind of moved away and split, and that was just a tremendous effort from our tech ops and our technical team.
Yeah, it's a little different from, let's just say, if for some reason a studio was transferring an IP from one developer to another, because in this case we have two long-standing games that have large active communities and a fairly large and robust infrastructure to support it. As the business needs of everyone was kind of in transition here, we had to get all the lawyers together. We had to get all the tech people together. Various parts of the studio had to say, okay, now what about this piece? Okay, then we got that one figured out. Oh, but what about this, and this, right? And so it tended to just be a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole for not insignificant period of time until everyone was on the same page. All the issues had been worked out. Everyone was ready to go, and we were able to have all the lawyers and all that sort of thing do all their final paperwork and all that to get it going. But it was really just I don't want to say too slow a process, but it was a process that really just involved working through just a massive pile of details to sort through.
And what about, the development teams themselves? Was there some discussion there of, do you want to move to this new company? Do you want to stay with Turbine? Did any developers choose to stay with Turbine?
I think that problem had sorted itself out much earlier, because Turbine basically was doing mobile games. There's been a long process of like, hey, who wants to work on the mobile games? Who wants to work on the on the PC games? What do you want to do? So by the time this process even began, which was quite a while ago, people had already sort of gravitated towards where they wanted. And of course that was asked, but for the most part, by the time this was in full swing, everybody were already on the projects that they wanted to be on.
And to formally answer your question, I can't think of anybody who was on one of the MMO teams that was actively employed on that team, and then when we transitioned, moved back to a different thing. So
right. And I know this is a question that was asked a few times in our chat rooms. Where are you physically working? Or did you have a big moving day and the U-Hauls were out and you moved all the hardware?
No, not really. So Turbine rents a large office space in the Boston area here, and so there was plenty of room to fit really a second studio in there. By the time everything had been signed, one of the advantages of the length of time is it gave us an opportunity to prepare for some of that stuff, not just on the technical side, but on the human resources side as well.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, what was a very large office with some unused space ended up getting really turned into two separate offices. And so for a lot of us, it was really just a matter of sitting down at the same desk we were sitting at a couple of months ago. It's just under a new scenario with a few new walls and locks and that sort of thing, because they had to do a little bit of building work there. But at least for a little while here, we're really sharing our former studio space.
Oh, that's pretty convenient too, and that must allow you as well to keep the momentum going as far as the development of the games goes, because while all this other stuff may have been going on, you don't have a programmer is not worrying about the legalities of who owns the toilet paper in the washroom, right?
Yeah, right.
So that must have been nice for the teams to be able to keep working and stay in the same space during that time.
The answer is the TP is owned by our landlord. No, but yeah, I mean, it was nice, and for it was fairly smooth for a lot of the DDO and LOTRO devs, because they were able to continue to sort of the process that they were able to do. I don't want to say that part of this was motivated by a lot of pen and paper gaming that happens in the office, but at least short term here, we have not disrupted too many campaigns.
Well, that's good to hear. I wouldn't want someone's campaign interrupted. One of the questions that came out of our chat room as well when we were discussing this was a little bit about the nebulous nature of what publishing deals are and the different interpretations that different people had about that. So can you clear it up a little bit for us, as far in generalities, of course, not into the minutia of it, but what is Daybreak's role in what Standing Stone Games is producing?
Well, I think it's difficult to answer because this is such a unique situation. I mean, I don't think it's ever been done other than EverQuest. So we have two sides. One is both us and Daybreak really want to give the studio as much independence as possible, because the games are beloved. They don't want to mess with that. On the other hand, in order to save sort of money, we want to leverage as much Daybreak technology as possible when we're going forward, because they also have a lot of knowledge. So even though we remain an independent studio, we'll probably leverage some of their technology in terms of, you might see something like the launcher changes to use more Daybreak technology as a money-saving thing. But we're not planning on having like a grand unified account that that you would do, or like the LOTRO points and DDO points will stay LOTRO points and DDO points, and Daybreak isn't planning on coming in and sort of overseeing how we've been doing things. We want to do those things that the players love as much as possible. So I think that it's a simple relationship in that we're independent. Daybreak gives us a lot of technology that we can eventually move to, and I think that that is going to benefit our studio a lot.
Yeah, if you think about the scale of something like an MMO, I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure that really is needed to support that, and that infrastructure is able to realize some significant cost savings through say Daybreak, because they're already operating other online games and things like that. Everything from say even some minor stuff like billing and human resources and domain registrations and things like that just it's easier to have a larger group that is already in the process of overseeing that for large games sort of lend their expertise to the process, rather than having to hire people and do that as the size of the development studio that we are. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, to answer what is a developer, what is a publisher, back in, let's just say, the old days of the 90s, when things were printed on plastic, the idea was that the developer would make the game, they would give it to the publisher. The publisher would do the disc printing, a lot of the marketing, things like that, and then, would be in many ways the public face of that game. Obviously, that doesn't apply in our digital world here, but a lot of that sort of relationship is the same. We do the development of the game, and the publishing arm is done by Daybreak.
Right. I know that was with some publisher and developer relationships, there is some editorial control, but that doesn't sound like that's the case in this situation.
I mean, we'll see what ends up happening here, but both games have long-standing communities with long-standing development teams with a lot of institutional knowledge. We know how to make these games, and we know how to keep them successful. So to some extent, it's like, don't rock the boat.
Right. And there's no, I think Rob mentioned that there's no move towards the being part of the Daybreak sort of subscription service that they have, where you can get access to all the games, or a move to Daybreak Cash or anything like that.
I haven't heard of any of that kind of stuff happening.
Okay.
No, we don't have plans. I mean, unless the reason we don't want to say absolutely is because there may be a big press from the players that would, in a year or two, if the players are like, hey, why can't I do this?
Right.
I don't know. We've always tried to sort of get player preferences and feedback into our plans. So so sometimes, if there's a great demand, I'm not saying it could never happen. We just don't have any plans for it in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and it like Jerry said, in this digital age, anything you say can be held against you at a future date. So.
That's never happened.
Yeah. I mean, we're pretty good about sort of saying unwise things and just relying on the good natures of the PCs to know that, like, hey, things can change. Right. So if we talk and say too much and then we have to change our plans, sometimes our plans change.
Now, when this was starting out, was there ever any thought of perhaps bringing Asheron's Call along with LOTRO and DDO into Standing Stone Games, or was that never part of the equation?
I hate to be the PR guy, but I can't really talk about anything related to Asheron's Call there. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. It's just a great deal of sad. That was the first MMO that I ever dove into and connected with, so there's a little bit of sadness there, but I understand completely.
There is sadness. I will say that.
Yeah. Now with LOTRO and DDO, it's a very established player base that you have there. You're up to update 33, I believe, on DDO.
And 34 coming very, very soon.
That's exciting because we've actually my wife and I have just jumped back into DDO. So. And that's when we record MMO Reporter, some of our regular listeners in our chat room, when we ask them what they've been playing, DDO is right in there. So our listener base is going to be very excited about that. Let's start with DDO and sort of look at, in the upcoming future, what does the future of DDO look like with Standing Stone Games?
Well, I mean, our biggest thing right now we're working on is our next expansion. We haven't done an expansion in a long time, and executing on one expansion, much less two, in the same studio is a tremendous challenge. So we're looking at sort of doing Ravenloft well. It's going to be an expansion-sized thing coming at the end of the year. We'd like to get it out for Halloween. We need to see on the schedule, though, because with the amount of content and systems we're trying to put into it, it looks good, but because we have some shared resources, it depends on how well the Mordor expansion finishes up, because any delay on that will also delay Ravenloft. It's just Ravenloft.
Right.
It's just the sort of nature of a small studio.
Right.
That would be an amazing Halloween expansion.
It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Short term here in Update 34, we have a free quest. We're adding a Reaper difficulty mode. This is sort of a hardcore difficulty mode for people who are particularly into that. We're redoing what are called champions. They are particularly tough random encounters that you can run into. That's in update 34. We have our 10th anniversary coming, or 11th anniversary coming up, rather, in late February. So we'll be doing some support for that related to, say, gifts and things like that, too. So we have Dragonborn in the works. That's a new race that we'll be bringing to DDO. No immediate ETA on that, but we're working on it.
We're looking to move it for the anniversary, but as we shuffle resources, it may come in a little bit later than that. But the anniversary is all dragon themed, as the players have demanded when we basically surveyed them to see what kind of anniversary they wanted. Right. So there will be a raid and 2 dungeons in the anniversary if everything goes well, and a new race. So that's pretty substantial. And then we're going to visit Stonelands in the summer with a content pack where players will be able to visit that area.
And for those who may not be familiar with it, that is a section of the Forgotten Realms that really, it's north of the Stormhorns, I believe. I'm pretty sure that's correct. So
I've got a few things here that I want to ask. First of all, it sounds very much like you did like I do with my kids and say, what do you want to do for your birthday? And the players came back and dragons.
That's true. We put up a poll, kobolds or Dragonborn, and Dragonborn won in terms of the next playable race.
Nice. So. And second thing is, because there's at its underlying base, DDO and LOTRO share the same engine, correct?
The different versions of the same engine, but yes.
They've parted somewhat substantially. Like, for instance, the way AI works in LOTRO and DDO, especially the monster combat AI, is now completely different.
Oh, okay. So,
as an example.
So are your programming tools, are they built in such a way that you do have some flexibility of where your team members go moving between the different games, so it's fluid, or are there set lines of, other than public-facing developers, some of the programmers and some of the other developers, do they move back and forth between the teams?
They can, but it takes someone experienced in both games.
Okay.
Like, if someone new came on and was ramping up in LOTRO, moving over to DDO would be sort of a substantial new knowledge increase.
Okay.
Whereas, for art, it's a little different because the art import tools are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say it kind of depends on what it is you're doing for the games. I think especially when you're looking at systems development, things like that, there's some pretty dramatic learning curves there.
Okay. Systems we can't, because the games are very different. I mean, just the deep knowledge required to execute systems. Systems are such a thing that if you're 2% wrong in systems, it can have a huge impact. So it's hard to move systems people over. Content is tough, not because of the technology involved, but because the content for DDO and LOTRO are very different. And knowing your player base and what they like for that kind of content is very different. So someone has a sort of design adjustment to do as they move from one place to another.
Right. Now, the last question that I have about that, with the different areas of Dungeons and Dragons, we've gone to Forgotten Realms, looking at Ravenloft. Is that do you have to look at those and get the rights to each specific area that you want to go into, or are you sort of or do you have free reign over the world of Dungeons and Dragons?
No, that's something we need to work with Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, they've been great. Yeah. I mean, Wizards are great to work with, but basically what happens is they approve and review most of the stuff we do, unless it's like, hey, we're updating this system which you've already approved. That's less of an issue. But any content related stuff that they approve, basically case by case, to see, because they don't want us to stray from the IP. But at this point, the team knows it so well that it's not usually an issue.
Mm-hmm. This line of questioning is for completely selfish reasons. I have to admit now, I'm a little ashamed that I was so selfish. But
you want Greyhawk, don't you?
No, actually, I was thinking, with interchangeable, if there's interchangeable teams and people could move, you could take the mounted combat from LOTRO, bring it into DDO, then you got Dragonlance. And really, that is the best DDO campaign, the best world that you could be in. So I'm at a loss as why you're not there yet.
Well, one of the things we want to sort of avoid is we try to concentrate on classic D&D feel.
Right.
And Dragonlance and similar settings are such a closed world that it's very difficult to import existing characters into them without disrupting the feel.
Right.
So you really can't get a Dragonlance feel if you're having, an Eberron character that goes into them. It just it disrupts the feel. So it's something that we wouldn't want to do. Whereas these classic packs, we've created a lore reason why players can sort of visit some of the classic areas without disrupting the world feel too much.
I don't think I've ever agreed with someone so much with such sadness before, but I understand completely. So that's the future of DDO. Now, LOTRO we've just gotten to the Black Gate just a little while ago. You're working on a Mordor expansion. I mean, what does this, the future of LOTRO look like?
I think LOTRO is really exciting. So we have an anniversary coming up, our 10th anniversary, which we want to do cool things. That's in April. And so we want to give justice to sort of the Battle of the Black Gate, certainly. But then we're also all working on the Mordor expansion. And the Mordor expansion will visit upon Mordor is a big place, and you can't really do the whole thing in one expansion. But even so, just the part of it that we're doing is like a tremendous amount of landscape. I think there's 4 subregions in the expansion, and then it will include, leveling and getting new gear and dealing with what the sort of the power struggles left over in Mordor, and then you'll be able to pursue. Choose sort of an allegiance that you can join and rise in, because now that the gates, if the gates open, then people can sort of go in and see the ruinous and darkness of Mordor and see if they can, survive there, basically.
Before we do go to Mordor, we have update 20, which is tentatively set for, I think it's March, I think, is kind of our tentative date for update 20. And that's going to include some of the battle at the Black Gate. So before we even get to Mordor, we've got this big beat in the story, which is the Battle of the Black Gate. So, that's something that we're working on here too. In the short term, people are going to see that, and real soon here. And then, of course, we've got the massive expansion into Mordor, which I imagine is really, with Mordor-related content and things like that are probably going to carry us through much of the year. So,
yeah, that's a pretty big move too in the life of the game as well, because for the past 10 years, this has been our destination. I can't imagine the weight of that as you design it, that this is where we've been going for 10 years, and it has to be something that is worthy of that journey.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a big challenge. And one of the things, I'll wake up in the middle of the night worrying about that, certainly.
One of the devs, or maybe even a couple of the devs, are going to have to deal with the fate of the ring itself, the Ring of Power. And can you imagine, the weight on your shoulders to make sure that doesn't suck, right? So,
now, make sure that they get enough food, because I know when you're carrying the one ring, you start to, you don't want to eat, your motivation is gone, so maybe some nice cat motivational posters all over their cubicles would be worthwhile. It's a heavy weight, that one ring.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, though, they're also extremely excited. I mean, can you, the team right now, it's like, okay, so here's my to-do list. Battle of the Black Gate, the Ring Drop, Mordor, 10th anniversary. I mean, holy moly, right? Our team's just got so much cool stuff going on this year. So
yeah. Now, I'm going to ask you a variation on a question that I know you've gotten a lot, because we've all heard the answer to the regular question for this, but I'm going to twist it a little bit and ask you, Why do you think discussion about the license for Lord of the Rings is such a big part of the community every few years?
It really has to do with local history in the community. You know, back way back when it first became an issue, there was at least one blogger who really just kind of beat that drum that this is a very large, significant issue, and was able to get a lot of traction in the LOTRO community in terms of sort of people saying, "Oh, hey, look what this guy's saying, right? I guess this is a big deal." And it really kind of became an early community issue for Lord of the Rings Online in a way that it isn't for most, if not all, other MMOs that I'm aware of. I mean, I can't really think of another MMO that's got that level of sort of community discussion over what really is a routine piece of business, right?
Right.
But so I really think it just goes down to the local history of how it sort of became discussed in the community early on as a little bit of a serious issue that we need to talk about because something, you know, oh my God, if this doesn't happen, what's going to happen, right? And when that initial or first couple of initial sort of updates were done to the license, we had people in the company that gave another end date, which is not something I think you typically see too much in the business world. You know, IP licenses like this are pretty common stuff. You know, every couple of years, people get together and say, "Hey, we good? We good? What do we got to talk about? We got to talk about anything? What's going on? You know, is there anything we need to adjust? Think about whatever." Nope. Yep. Sign off. There you go. So, you know, that's really the process itself. But because it kind of had this deadline and that was publicly stated a couple of times, and because it had become such a big topic of discussion, particularly on the LOTRO forums, but elsewhere as well.
Oh, we talked about it on the show. Like, it was part of our discussion too.
But really, you know, you probably got that discussion because of, say, the MMO troll and some of the other blogs and conversations that had happened there. Right. Yeah. So kind of lost my train of thought here. Let me think what I was going to say. So ultimately, it's a combination of factors, but it really is sort of not a big deal, and it's not something that we're going to be providing sort of a deadline on in the future. It kind of turned into a little bit of a reality television show piece of speculation, and that's something that, you know, while I certainly understand why people want to talk about it and that, it's just not really something that we're going to be talking about in the future. It's a non-issue, so let's let it be a non-issue.
Right. Now, and to continue on about the longevity of the Lord of the Rings Online, of the game, this is as far as the general lore, if you don't go into the appendices, if you don't go into other parts of Tolkien's Middle-earth, this is an endpoint for the story. So how do you, as developers, approach this endpoint in a story while continuing the game? Like, where, in very general terms, are there plans for post-Mordor of what's going to happen with the game to keep the player base moving forward?
I can't tell you how excited the team is about exploring some of the interesting parts of the story world without having to basically bear the burden of the ring. There is a lot of story, and because Tolkien was an archivist, basically the world is well documented and there are a lot of interesting places to visit. I think one of the challenges that we'll have in Mordor is convincing the players that when the ring drops, that's the beginning. Finally, the hero's story is kind of coming to a close that you know about, but your story as a character is just opening up because you're no longer sort of beholden to the actual story of it. And now you can sort of explore what happens post-Mordor that the books got into a little bit, but with we can explore parts of the world and the consequences of this tremendous movement of evil sort of blowing up, and then the pieces trying to make a power grab in the vacuum.
Yeah, I seem to recall there was hundreds of pages after the ring drop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, as far as what we can explore, is it easier when you look at the works that Tolkien has published? Is it easier to think of what's excluded or what's included? Like, do you have is there more of what he created that you can look at, or is there more sort of outside of your license that's out there that you can only touch in generalities?
I mean, the books include so much, and there's so much in the books themselves that we haven't even touched, that I don't really think that it will be any kind of issue for the foreseeable future. There's whole lands that were never touched upon of these people of the south and to the southeast that are coming into Mordor to support that effort that we haven't even talked about, much less sort of all of the evil of Mordor itself. I mean, Mordor is huge. Mordor is like almost 3/4 the size of all of Middle Earth combined, if you look at the map. So we can't even do all of Mordor in one expansion. We're going to have to, be rolling out Mordor content for quite a while.
Well, that's very exciting. That's as a LOTRO player, that's really, really exciting. Now, as I sort of close things up here, for many years, my one request of the LOTRO team, at least, and I am mostly a LOTRO player, and of the developers, was I asked for Ent Play for the longest time, and we got it. We got Ent Play. But I think that I have a new request that we need to keep going. And I will be asking you at every opportunity that we possibly can, and that would be mountable Ents that we can throw rocks from. There's a great scene in the Two Towers, but where we've got our Hobbit heroes that are taking out Uruk-hai and goblins and all that from atop their Ent Mount. I don't know if Treebeard would like being called an Ent Mount, but we're going to go with that. So I confirmed or deny. Will there at some point in the future be mountable Ents?
If we did it, you would have to wait days and weeks for the Ents to decide to allow you to mount them.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. There could be a dialogue box with lots of ... Right. You just have to click it for like 1,000 times, Yeah.
So you
that was the problem.
You go for a couple days, you come back.
Yes. We tried to do the session play, but it didn't play test well because it took so long for the Ent screen to load.
That's awesome. I do want to make sort of one little editorial comment here at the end for both of you, and this is a discussion that we've had on a couple different shows that I'm on, and that's about this transition to Standing Stone Games from Turbine. I think that I speak at least for those of us at MMO Reporter, LOTRO Reporter, in that there's a lot more ease with this big transition, which could, for other games, and for me at least, for other games, for other studios, could be a source of some great stress because of the uncertainty of what the future may mean. But because of the community and the culture that you've built up around your games, I really have a lot of trust in what you're going to do, in the direction that you're taking and the future of these games because of the community and the culture that you've built. And I just want to say again, for everyone who's listening, that for me, I have full faith in what you guys are doing. I know that you wouldn't jump into this huge undertaking if you didn't have a long-term goal. So I want to thank you for taking these games, which, although you didn't say it, this is completely my conjecture. I'm going to say, you saved these two games by moving them out of Turbine, not because Turbine was a bad place, but because Turbine was going in a different direction. So thank you so much to everyone at Standing Stone Games for taking these games and allowing us to have hopefully many years of fun in the DDO and LOTRO universes. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're as welcome as I can without actually commenting on anything you said.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, just that's fantastic. So thanks, guys, for sitting down and chatting with me about LOTRO, about DDO, about Standing Stone Games. It's a lot of excitement when you start something new, and I really wish you all the best with this endeavor, this journey that you're going on.
Great. Thank you very much for having us on.
Thanks for watching the video, everybody. Don't forget to check out all the other podcasts at MMOReporter.com or by clicking on any of the links here. And please check out our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MMOReporter. Thanks, everyone, and see you in game.